as he hosted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for talks on Monday.
I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup. So I hope Iran is not trying to build up, as I've been reading that they're building up weapons and other things.
Earlier this year, Trump warned that Tehran's nuclear capabilities would be completely and fully obliterated if it restarts key enrichment sites. Israeli media have also raised alarms that Iran may be stockpiling long-range missiles. Russian President Vladimir Putin has told his army to take more Ukrainian territory despite ongoing talks to end Russia's war on Ukraine. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports that Ukraine is accusing the Kremlin of undermining peace negotiations.
Russia controls about 70% of Ukraine's southeastern region of Zaporizhia. President Trump says Putin tells him he wants peace, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the Russian leader is not sincere. Zelensky is saying Putin tells the President of the United States that he wants to end the war, but then says through media that he will continue the war, striking Ukrainian cities with missiles and drones. Russia says it is changing its stance in negotiations after claiming Ukraine tried to attack one of Putin's homes. Zelensky says this is a lie, and Russia is using it as a pretext to expand attacks on Ukraine. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
More than a dozen states will raise their minimum wage on January 1st. NPR's Jennifer Ludden reports the move comes as more Americans struggle with the cost of living.
The federal minimum wage has been stuck since 2009 at just $7.25 an hour. In addition to the state hikes this year, dozens more localities are also raising their minimum wage. It's a growing trend, according to the National Employment Law Project, as prices outpace paychecks for millions of workers. The boost comes from new laws, cost of living adjustments, or voter ballot measures. Supporters say raising the minimum wage reduces hunger and poverty, while critics note it can also lead to job cuts. Both blue and red states are raising rates in 2026, in some places beyond $17 an hour. But the Employment Law Project says 20 states are keeping the lower federal rate, many of them in the South, where most black workers live. Jennifer Ludden, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, Dow futures are down 13 points at this hour. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is now 9:04. Development is moving forward on the new downtown Jacksonville Starbucks planned for the Bank of America building on Laura Street. The city of Jacksonville issued a construction permit last week for the build-outs of the more than 2,000 square foot space. It won't be the first time a Starbucks coffee shop has been in downtown Jacksonville. Starbucks had stores on Forsyth Street and in the Jacksonville Landing, but both closed more than a decade ago. The latest Starbucks franchise is being developed with the help of $130,000 worth of city incentives. The new location will be open in the Tower lobby. Orlando city officials don't yet know what killed a dozen of the iconic swans that make downtown's Lake Eola their home. Although bird flu is suspected, tests will be conducted to make the official determination. About 6 swans lived at the park before this incident. The last bird flu outbreak there was in February 2024. It is a cold start to the day here in Northeast Florida, and it's going to be a cold afternoon as well, with highs only reaching the low to mid-50s across the area with partly sunny skies and breezy conditions. It's going to be another cold overnight period as well, with lows getting down into the mid-20s inland, lower 30s out at the beaches. Freeze watches are in place overnight tonight, mainly for areas west of the St. Johns River. It'll be cold and dry for New Year's Eve tomorrow with clear skies. Highs tomorrow reach the 50s area-wide with warmer temperatures at the coast.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Imaginable Futures, funding programs in the U.S. with the goal of ensuring young children and their parents get the education they need to thrive. Learn more at imaginablefutures.com. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, fixing nights of lights. Midway through St. Augustine's iconic season of illumination, we look at how efforts to control the annual crush are going. Later in the program, from art to improv, a local advocate is advancing conversations around mental health by changing how we talk about it. But first, after last year's crowds led to street closing, traffic jams, and much public urination, the city implemented a series of fixes. We check in with two St. Johns County reporters about how it started and how it's going. Here to discuss it, we're joined by Noah Hertz, St. Johns County reporter at Jacksonville Today. Noah, good morning.
Good morning, Ann.
We're also joined on the line by Jessica Clark, anchor and reporter at First Coast News. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning, Ann. Good morning, Noah.
Good morning.
Thank you, Jessica, for joining us via video. You know, the joke has become, this is Nights of Taillights, and I think we actually just got an email with that same headline. Jessica, this is a story that has evolved over the years that you've been reporting from St. Johns County, and it has certainly changed the way St. Johns County looks and feels around November to January.
It absolutely does. This was started decades ago in order to boost the economy in downtown St. Augustine. And boy, has it. And so it started with just a few of the city buildings and a few of the merchant buildings that were outlined in lights. And it has transformed into this beautiful, beautiful display of lights and trees. And so many more buildings are joining in and have joined in with the gorgeous display of lights. But what has come with that as well is a lot of people. And so they're walking, they're riding in their vehicles, they're riding in the trolleys, horses and buggies, they're on golf carts. And so it is now on the busiest nights, shoulder to shoulder, walking down St. George Street and even along the Bayfront. And that's very, very different from what we have seen in St. Augustine. It really hit a peak last year. And the amount of people here for Nights of Lights, according to various city officials I've spoken to, is about the same that it was last year. So it is very different than what it originally started as.
Yeah, I mean, this event, Noah, started back in 1993. Then Mayor Len Weeks thought it would be a good idea. It was a way, and people don't remember St. Augustine back in those days. I mean, it was a city that rolled up its, sidewalks at 5 o'clock. It was hard to find a restaurant or a bar that was even open, after 5 back in those days. And so this was supposed to be a little bit of an invigoration for business. It really has become something that business downtown has become reliant on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you talk to business owners, they will talk about how, however they feel about the massive throngs of people that come to the area for this season, they need the boost that they provide. And it's funny you mentioned that it was started to help business, and now the resulting people that have come downtown have caused so many issues and questions of how to solve infrastructure problems. So a finger on the monkey's paw has curled, I think. But a big issue I've heard from people this year is concerns that, as of a week or two ago, they had not been making as much money as they had in years prior. And there's a handful of different variables, I think, that folks have been kind of identifying with that. But I know one has been some frustrations about the way that the city has tried to mess with parking in order to keep visitors from parking outside of people's homes and blocking them from getting out of their driveways.
Yeah. And one of the things that they've implemented is some significant fines for people who are parking, off-street parking throughout areas of the district that are residential, basically after, the afternoon into the evening, pretty much every single day of Nights of Lights. And it's $100 if you violate.
Yeah.
This was done specifically, though, Noah, because last year there were trouble even passing through some of these streets. Cars that couldn't get around one another really would have been very problematic or even
Mhm.
tragic if it had been a first responder situation
yeah.
because the
Oh, yeah.
streets were simply impassable.
Yeah, I mean, there were some situations, thankfully not quite that bad, where they needed a first responder downtown, but I remember attending a meeting earlier this year where city officials were talking about how custodians could not get to downtown to empty out the garbage cans around the plaza. And so you've got situations there where trash is piling up around these garbage cans, and the custodial workers from the city literally cannot navigate through the throngs. And I'm sure Jessica can attest to this too. Last year, my wife and I went to light up night, and the amount of cars that were parked on the green in front of the historic fort was mind-boggling. And you're looking at that thinking, like,
Which is not a legal place
that
to
is
park.
not illegal. That's one of the areas where if you park there this year, you will get a $100 fine. And so that's part of where that came from too, of people just kind of inventing parking spaces out of the blue. And there was no way that a traffic cop could have gotten their way through all of the massive crowds and bumper to bumper traffic in order to like properly give people traffic tickets.
We're talking about Nights of Lights in St. Augustine and some efforts to fix what has become an annual crush. If you have been to Nights of Lights or if you have chosen not to go to Nights of Lights, we'd love to hear from you. You can give us a call on air at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org and you can find all the ways to connect with us. Jessica, one of the things that happened last year was the inavailability of bathrooms. I kind of alluded to this in my opening. But one of the things that was happening was they had established some porta potties in addition to the permanent facilities that are around downtown. Even people going in to try to clean those were being berated by people waiting because the lines were so long. And a lot of people chose simply to not use them at some point, something merchants and other people, visitors and residents alike, found to be really problematic.
Right. And when you say not use them, that means they were urinating in public. And that, according to the city manager, was absolutely not okay and was a public safety health hazard and just not something that the city of St. Augustine wanted to be known. And, as far as anything on social media or reviews or anything like that, they spoke about it, but they don't want Nights of Lights associated with that. So they have brought in a lot more porta potties and have them in different positions around downtown. They are being used, and the city has hired more staff this year to actually clean the restrooms because the city was relying on city staff to do that, and it was just overwhelming. As you mentioned, the public was berating the people who were coming in to clean the bathrooms. And so this year, so far as I've heard, the extra cleaning staff and the extra bathrooms have made a difference when it comes to that.
Jessica, some of the other changes, I actually went to Nights of Lights last night just because I wanted to sort of take a firsthand look at how it's going. It was packed. I mean, really, truly. And, this is mid-season. It is not a particularly significant night on a Monday, and sometimes those are less busy, but it really was very, very crowded. They've introduced an app that allows people to look at parking and shuttle options. Shuttle is something that they're really trying to steer people towards, encouraging people not to drive into the center of downtown. The app basically tells you how long it takes, to get from one shuttle location to downtown. And pretty much last night, all of those destination times were in the range of about 30 minutes, whether people were coming from St. Augustine Beach across the Bridge Alliance into downtown, or were coming from up towards the jail on US 1 or Browdy's on US 1. So they were roughly, all in that range, a good chunk of time.
I was curious how long you were going to say, because I've spoken to other people, and on the app, it said the shuttle time was 60 to 80 minutes.
Ooh.
And I mean, 30 minutes is a long time because you're talking about a mile or two.
Or less in some cases. Yeah.
Yeah, right, or less. And so some people I've spoken to, they were coming either from Jacksonville or northern St. Johns County, and they saw 60 minutes on a shuttle? Well, I'm not going to park at a satellite parking lot and ride a shuttle. I'm just going to try and give it a whirl and try and find a parking spot downtown, and which completely negates the, the point of having satellite parking lots and trying to get
Thus
traffic
adding
out
another
of town.
2 minutes to the shuttle rides when you have another car who has added themselves to the mix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It did seem too that there's a lot of sort of freelance buggies going around now. I mean, there's the trolleys and the little trains that we're all accustomed to seeing. There are the buses that are provided by the city that transport people from the shuttle sites. But there are a lot of these little, go-tuck type open golf cart or elongated golf carts. They're all decorated for the holidays. And I don't get a sense, Jessica, as to whether the city is regulating or encouraging or discouraging people from providing those kinds of
Extra
DIY tourist vehicles.
Yeah, so I spoke with the city police chief yesterday just to kind of get her take on how things have been going since the busier part of Nights of Lights, which is really the latter part of December and going into the first part of January. And to answer your question about the vehicles, she mentioned it without me asking it and said that there are so many more vehicles that the city is in the process of like reworking the franchise agreements. It's not done yet, but to really try and get a handle on the amount of vehicles that are going around. Now, there is a system in place where you have this little gold decal that you can put on, say, if you have a tour company and it uses golf carts or something like that. But she was even saying something more is in the works and needs to be done just to kind of regulate all of these vehicles, just to keep people safe, make sure that they're legitimate and licensed and good to go. Now, that time period that I mentioned between Christmas and New Year's, I hope I can say this on the radio, is referred to as Hell Week. And I thought that was something I'd heard city officials call it that. But she said, oh, no, that didn't start with the city. That started with the merchants, especially the restaurant workers, because they are inundated with, long lines and people not able to get their food as fast as they want to, and waiting times, just to get into a restaurant, people are waiting an hour. Now, she did tell me, though, Anne, that this year traffic is moving more smoothly than it was last year. And she kind of chuckled afterwards and she said, now, I know it's still taking people to get around, or get in. It's taking an hour, but last year was taking 2 hours. So she said there is progress. They have officers who are directing traffic at the intersections and at the walkways. And I have noticed that is making a big difference, because pedestrians last year were just kind of walking into the roads. And cars were having to stop, and it was really clogging traffic. And so the addition of those officers, which is from the sheriff's office, actually, it's none of the St. Augustine police, it's all from the sheriff's office who have helped with that. Also, they have those, I guess they're railings. They look like bike racks. They call them bike racks, to keep pedestrians on the sidewalks instead of going out and then milling into the road. And she said that has helped tremendously.
Yeah, those barricades are up and down Avenida Menendez now, and they really are forcing people to go to a designated crossing area where there is an officer helping in order to prevent that. No, people just kind of crossing across.
I know some of that too was implemented because of, I know there was the incident, I believe it was last Thanksgiving, I forget where, but where a car drove into a group of people at a holiday gathering. Yeah, and so there was a deliberate, that was something the city was actively talking about throughout the year, of wanting to ensure that there was enough barricades so that, God forbid, somebody did try to drive into pedestrians, they would not be able to.
And obviously that's something that's happened a lot of places with, malintent. And so
absolutely,
that's something city officials really have to be aware of. I just want to read an email or two. This one from Daryl saying, the thing that's missing from Nights of Lights conversation is how many of the cars jamming traffic downtown come from the 500,000 new residents in Northeast Florida, World Golf Village, Nocatee, Palm Coast. tourists getting blamed for the situation are walking, riding, the trains, trolleys, pedicab, et cetera. They rarely get in cars. Has anyone done studies or research about the people actually driving through town?
That's a good question. And I do know that, I when you talk to people locally, there is definitely a sense of being a little unsure of who to blame for all of this. A lot of it does get levied on the tourists, but I've heard, I've talked to the folks at the VCB, the Visitors and Conventions Bureau locally, that kind of they run the app. They are focused on getting people to visit town, stay in the hotels, generate money like that. And that's the thing that they will point out too, is that, these people are not driving cars around. They are staying close enough to walk, or they are staying somewhere where they can go to a shuttle point and stay like that. So I know a lot of the focus this year was kind of on this PR campaign that was a big focus of the VCBs, of trying to convince people that this was, they said, a walking event, not a driving event. But you have to wonder, local people who live in Nocatee, who live just outside of St. Augustine, kind of might not feel like they need to download an app, might not feel like they need to look into this kind of stuff, and might be some of the ones who are just kind of driving headlong into downtown, not really realizing what they're going to get caught up in.
I want to talk about the VCB a little bit too, with both of you, because they are the funding mechanism that advertises St. Johns County elsewhere.
Mhm.
They basically take the bed tax money that comes in from hotel stays. They're required by law to spend that advertising for the area. And so that money has gone directly into marketing Nights of Lights as a destination. It has been a number of years running now, selected as, Southern Living Magazine, Christmas Town of the Year, and National Geographic named it one of the top 10 places in the world to go see light displays. It's been getting a lot of coverage, no small part because there's a marketing effort, that brings people into town that write these sort of articles promoting St. Augustine. The VCB is, at this point saying, there's ways to make this a walking event. This is kind of how it should be enjoyed. But where are the locals in all of this, Jessica, when it comes to the experience of living in St. Augustine, in and around St. Augustine, versus people who they're trying to make the experience better for as visitors?
Well, most of the locals go in January. They don't go in December. They just don't put up with it it all. And when it's really, very busy. But okay, so some immediate feedback that the city got was that the neighborhoods, the residential streets that are right next to downtown, have said that they have seen less traffic coming through their streets because the roads are blocked off from US 1. There are barricades so that you can't drive down those side streets, which are streets people live on, in order to, bypass some of the traffic. So that has worked this year. The city really tried to respond to people not even being able to park by their homes because it was those parking spaces were clogged. And so that's why you saw, part of the reason you saw those $100 fines go up for parking in the wrong spot. And also then the blocking off of those residential streets. That has seemed to work. And from the folks who live on those streets, they say, thank you for listening to us. The city also last year tried to shorten the amount of time that Nights of Lights was taking place as a response to appeal to the folks who live in St. Augustine or right around downtown, because thinking that, well, it'll be a shorter time period for all the crowds that are coming through. That was met with, an outcry from the business community saying, wait a second, if you shorten the amount of time that people are coming, you're going to shorten the amount of time people are spending money downtown. And so that's going to hurt the folks who are in the tourism business. So this year, I'm hearing mixed reviews from folks who are locals, who have gone downtown and said, I like it busy, and this is just the way it is going to be now. And then, there are others who simply will not go downtown during the month of December and will wait until January. It is 2 weeks shorter now. In January, it's going to cut off on the 11th instead of running through the whole month.
Yeah, Jessica, one of the decisions to shorten that came after this outcry last year. But around the same time, the city was talking about broadening its efforts to bring in more tourists, particularly from Europe and overseas. And the idea was events, days that are not Nights of Lights, but again, this money for tourist development being used to appeal to perhaps cruise travelers, people in the port of Jacksonville or at Port Canaveral, trying to get them to St. Augustine prior to their cruise for a few days. Is there a concern that the rest of the calendar is going to start filling up around St. Augustine, similar to Nights of Lights, if that concerted effort and those tourist attraction dollars are being spent to lure in, now more overseas
Right.
tourists?
Well, more and more people, I think, who live in St. Augustine, I do, are saying there seems to be no off season anymore. September was a slow month, and now we have Sing Out Loud, the Sing Out Loud Festival, which who depends on who you talk to, saves St. Augustine from really hitting a slump because of all the people that come in for that music festival. And so that's one instance, right, of trying to fill a gap, trying to fill a hole in the local economy. So yeah, there is this sense of cute little St. Augustine isn't as cute and little as it once was,
Yeah.
because there's so many more people. And truly, the population of St. Augustine has not increased.
Yeah.
But St. Augustine is a very small, it's about 15,000 people, and it's a very small, area of land. What has increased is the population of St. Johns County, which is so much more, and that's really a lot of where we're seeing the people come in from, but also for Nights of Lights, but also the international and the national traffic has come through because St. Augustine does get all those accolades.
Sure. I mean, Nocatee alone, 30,000 residents compared to
Yeah.
15,000 in St. Augustine. So that really juiced the numbers in the county. We have a few emails. Miranda emailing, Nights of Lights is a great event, but as a resident, the rub is going downtown for something other than Nights of Lights and having to pay outrageous parking fees. We also have an email from Walter. He says, as a merchant in the uptown area and as a resident of the city, Nights of Lights is a double-edged sword, great for business, but also a nightmare to get around, and especially to leave work after closing. It seems there's quite a growing backlash against the event for some city commissioners and a lot of residents. Definitely no easy answers to this issue.
Yeah, I'm glad Walter wrote in with that point, because to get back to a previous point Jessica made, this event has been caught in this kind of perennial issue that St. Augustine has of balancing the interests of residents who want it to be easier to move from point A to point B outside of their homes around downtown, and business owners who need the foot traffic, need the tourists, need people to sustain that. So a perfect example of that is, this situation Jessica mentioned, where the city has really cracked down on driving and parking throughout the neighborhoods that are directly adjoining downtown. So that's Uptown, that's the Flagler Model Land, these neighborhoods that are right in downtown practically, and that people have maybe used as a cut through to get around when the
Sure.
traffic is at its worst, or maybe sneaky park down a spot where it didn't look like anybody was going to be there anyway. The city has cracked down on that big time with resident-only decals that you need for your car. But then that sparked this big back and forth with the local businesses. I talked to another business owner on San Marco who said, this is preventing our locals who are not tourists, but who don't live in that neighborhood, from coming and visiting. And the business owner I talked to specifically blamed that for a decrease in business that they had seen in December. And so
It's such a balancing act, right?
it absolutely is. And
Yeah.
the tricky thing too, a frustration I've heard from some folks I've talked to, is that, the city has been talking about this for the entire year. I mean,
Yeah.
practically every single city meeting that they have held since January of this year has in some way, shape, or form involved a discussion about Nights of Lights. And I've heard frustration from some people I know that is like, why are they still implementing changes and tweaking things now? I mean, the traffic situation with the folks in Uptown, after a wave of business owners came to the city commission in November, then the city said, okay, this traffic plan that we made over the summer, maybe we will midstream make some changes to it. But there is definitely a frustration among some people of why are they making changes midstream in December when the planning for this has been going on since, last December.
Well, and I'm going to jump in there too, Noah, and I
Yeah,
understand that frustration, but I do think sometimes you don't know until you're in the mix.
absolutely.
And I think
Absolutely.
that that's what the city has found itself in. And the fact that the city was able to make some of these changes within a year, like come up with the
Oh,
plans
yeah. Oh, yeah.
and make the changes. They have received some positive feedback from county leaders, from various people who do live in the city. I think the challenge is that it is just so popular and it is such a little city with little tiny streets that
Hmm.
are narrow, and you're trying to put a whole, as my mother says, they're trying to put a 10-cent scoop in a 5-cent cone. It's just hard. And but going back, Noah, to what you said about the trying to make some changes halfway through.
Hmm.
So the city did change the ability to come off the Bridge of Lions, and
Hmm.
for the Nights of Light, you were only able to go north. Well, just within the past couple of weeks, I guess they changed the traffic route and let you go left off of the bridge. And according to the police chief, she said that has made a world of difference.
Interesting.
And so, I hear what the residents are saying. The city's been working on this for a year, but
Hmm.
sometimes you don't know until you're in the mix of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like there's a chance for them to really test any of these things out. I know earlier this summer there was talk, and they tested out some of the changes in traffic patterns and in additional bathrooms and that kind of thing for 4th of July. But 4th of July is nowhere near the density of people that the
Right.
city gets for Nights of Light. So when they tested some of these things out in 4th of July, they were like, okay, these went really well for
For this
this.
one night.
Exactly, for one night, but the amount of the stress test that those things then have to endure for the extent of Nights of Lights is by no means the same.
We got a call
Right.
from Kate in St. Augustine who didn't want to go on air, but she said locals feel held hostage by the event, and the VCB made their bed, and now locals have to take it on the chin. We also have a call from Jerry in St. Augustine. Good morning, Jerry. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, good morning. I actually love Night of Lights. I acknowledge the difficulties that it causes, and I am a city resident. I just am really careful about when I go. I go one time a year to see it, and I feel like it brings the real meaning of the holidays, of people together, enjoying each other, enjoying the sights near and far. And those are things that we don't have that much anymore. And I just wanted to say I love it.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. Appreciate the call and the comment. We also have an email from Nancy saying, here in St. Augustine, local residents have renamed the annual Nights of Light celebration Nights of Taillights due to the constant traffic congestion during this event. Many people who live here become trapped in their neighborhoods during busy times. We've learned that we can only go out in the mornings during the week and sometimes not at all on the weekends and holidays. On a weekend evening in December 2023, a house caught on fire in our neighborhood because of the traffic challenges. It took the fire department a very long time to reach the fire, and the house could not be saved. In the past 2 years, the problem has gotten worse. Even though the city has tried to solve the problems, this event continues to create chaos for locals and tourists. How about a year off? That's an interesting idea, Noah. I don't think anybody at the city level feels that is something that they would move towards. I mean,
No,
as we mentioned, this has become sort of a very important piece
Yeah.
of the puzzle for finances for merchants in there.
A comment that the city commissioners made a few times earlier this year was that, the genie is kind of out of the bottle. They can't really undo the amount of popularity because like you said, like our previous caller said, it's a great event. And when you have a great event that you market to people want to come to your great event. So I think the city is in this kind of conundrum where, yeah, you have a lot of residents who feel that way. My good friend Tess, who works at the bike shop in St. Augustine, right along US 1 there, told me just how terrifying it is biking into work sometimes with all the added traffic there. But they kind of can't undo the marketing and the popularity that this event has gotten. So that was why the move was made this year to shorten things by a week and extend it back into November instead of all the way out into January. I would not be surprised if they continue to experiment a little bit with when exactly it starts and finishes. But no, I do not think there's a chance that the city takes a year off. One of the city commissioners, Commissioner Springfield, repeatedly has this line where he says that, the city doesn't make any money from Nights of Lights, which I guess technically the city government doesn't make any money from Nights of Lights, but all of the businesses do. And so I think the businesses need that. They've become reliant on that, like you said.
Well, Jessica, there has been this enormous new influx of money from the county. I mean, I think the importance of the event from an economic standpoint is sort of laid bare by the fact that the county agreed to spend another $650,000, give that money to St. Augustine on top of the $200,000 they were already spending.
Right.
I mean, it costs money, but clearly the people who are running the government, whether it's state or county level, feel that it's worthwhile.
Absolutely. And it's paying for, the basics, right? So the people who are directing traffic, the bathrooms, the staff cleaning the bathrooms, they hired extra staff to pick up trash. And so it's to pay for some of the basics that are needed when you have an event like this. Last year the city lost more than $300,000 because they ended up having to pay for more things because of the larger crowds. And so that's one of the reasons that the city went to the county and said, we need more money to put this on, and got it.
Jessica, I'm curious if you have a sense of this too, but I know when the county was debating whether to give that extra money to St. Augustine, something that the city repeatedly said was that they were asking for this additional money in part as a one-time thing, that they were not going to come and ask for it again near to this extent next year. But given that a lot of it is being spent on the extreme basics, porta potties and additional staffing for public safety, I will admit to being a little skeptical about that.
I don't know. I don't know how they're not going to need it.
Yeah.
They've got to be able to pay for at least the services they're providing this year. And it'll be interesting to see if they are in the hole this year or not.
Yeah.
But we won't know that until sometime in February at least.
And perhaps we'll see how much parking ticket revenue they bring in as well. It could be significant. Noah Hertz, Jessica Clark, thank you so much for your reporting on St. Johns County and St. Augustine. Thanks for talking about Nights of Lights today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And up next, advancing conversations around mental health by changing how we talk about it. Welcome back. Well, my next guest has worked to change how we talk about mental health by changing the ways we talk about mental health, from art to music to improv. Their work has been met in some cases, however, with institutional resistance, particularly here on the First Coast. Here to tell us about it is Gabrielle Magid, founder and CEO of Stronger Than Stigma. Gabrielle, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to see you in the almost new year. This has been a busy year for you. You were on a South by Southwest panel talking about mental health and women. You won an award this year from the UN for Logic and Peace. You've raised a bunch of money for some of the initiatives that you are working towards. So first of all, just remind us a little bit about the work of Stronger Than Stigma and the ways that you're trying to bring in different media for us to use to talk about that subject.
Sure. So I say that Stronger Than Stigma is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to mental health advocacy for the next generation. And when I say next gen, I mean um, millennials, Gen Z, whoever comes up after, in this transitional period of life, but also next gen, meaning a fresh take on mental health. What's the language that we're using to describe the struggle and also just the day to day of caring for yourself and your mental well being, whether it's a good day or a bad day? Um, so the idea, when you talk about business or, like in a consumer packaged goods world, if you slap a label on, this product, what is it that we're quote unquote selling? It's a sense of belonging. It's the power of knowing that you're not alone. And that in and of itself is magic.
And so finding new ways of talking about mental health, you have reached into, as I mentioned, a variety of different formats. You're a big fan of improv. You've worked, music and music events into the conversation, trying to broaden it. You work in various, different kinds of visual art. But some of your approach has been a little too new, perhaps, for some people. Explain to us what kind of resistance you've met in some cases when you're trying to push the conversation forward or expand the ways that we talk about mental health.
Sure. So when we do things like improv comedy, stand-up comedy, concert and conversations, what we're trying to do is bring people together. That's the ultimate goal, right? I definitely curate what goes on the stage, but at the end of the day, I want people to be able, in the audience, to be able to look to their left and right and be like, wow, everybody was brought together here, found it palatable, was excited to attend. Like, look, there are other people like me, right? The pushback, I think, has really come, and the word that was just used to describe our work was avant-garde. And it was said in a way where that wasn't supposed to be a compliment. So, you take that in. I'm used to hearing no. But I Google and I'm like, there are more definitions to this word. And I'm learning, like, yes, it has to do with being innovative and experimental. And in my mind, throwing a piece of spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. And then the other part of it is you're so ahead of your time that you're not appreciated in the space. The people in the space can understand what it is that we're doing, where yes, we're dealing with a mental health crisis. We have a shortage of professionals that are qualified to treat mental health issues. I can't change that, right? Like I can't be a medical school professor and bring up, the next crew of psychiatrists. There are people who can do that. There are people who can, eliminate some of the loans that it takes to attend med school and make it a, I guess, more sexy career, so that, we have a pipeline that way. But people rarely think about what it's like in the day-to-day. And that's what I'm focused on. People who are struggling are up against stigma. When we say stronger than stigma, the stigma is not just societal, where it's like, oh, somebody's a leper, let's run and hide. I'm focused on self-stigma. How do you feel about yourself, knowing that you're struggling or knowing that you have this diagnosis? And you don't even need the diagnosis to be part of this quote-unquote club. I joke that it's like membership, a lifetime membership to a club that you never wanted to join in the first place. But while you're here, there's inside jokes, like we can make the best of it. And that community support and feeling like you can show up outside of your home as your full self really makes a difference. It's not clinical. It's not sterile, the environment. It's beautiful. It's thought-provoking. It's colorful. and you don't see that in treatment settings or in what you see on TV about support groups. Those all happen in a church basement is what we're shown with stale coffee or whatnot. And that's not the vibe here. Millennials and people who, regardless of age, just understand what it is that we're trying to do, look at this and go, wow, this is different. This is something that could push us forward in the space and in the sector, because whatever we've been doing for the last 50 or so years clearly hasn't worked. So shouldn't we try something new?
And I know that you've said that you're doing fundraising in part to try to broaden your footprint and to make these kinds of events and services more widely available. But you've talked about the difficulty sometimes in fundraising when the people are looking for certain metrics, certain measurements of effectiveness, or perhaps just aren't familiar with the end consumer of what it is that they're helping to fund. Can you explain kind of what problems you've encountered in fundraising when it comes to that?
Sure. So, I'm trying to eliminate as many barriers to the experience as I possibly can, right? So your end user is, let's say they're young people, right? They are at the beginning of their career. They're not the people who, have made their living and now want to give back to the community. I don't think a generous spirit is ever defined by how much is in your bank account. Like $5 from anybody who is willing is really well received, right? And if everybody in the world gave us $1, that's $7 billion. Like, oh my gosh. And I wish we could raise like that, right? What happens is when I'm speaking to people of different generations, if they can't relate to the struggle, they've never experienced it themselves, or so they think. Like the human condition really does include this wide range of emotions and experiences, whether you've dealt with grief before, loneliness, it really is applicable to everybody. And so it's hard to ask people who aren't familiar or don't think that it exists, or all of these things that like our grandparents would say, to then support what it is that we're doing, and also something innovative in the space, because they want to make sure that it is something that it has been tested. But with every challenge, I like to rise to the occasion. So they said, get metrics. I said, all right, let's find a Harvard researcher and professor to give us those darn metrics. We've got them. This is tried and true.
Gabrielle, what if people want more information just briefly about Stronger Than Stigma or your efforts, where would they find it?
We are on social media at Stronger Than Stigma is the handle. So Instagram, Facebook, and then also our website, www.strongerthanstigma.org.
All right. Well, Gabrielle Magid, thank you so much for being here. Great to see you.
Thank you, Anne.
All right. Up next, celebrating the noon year. We'll tell you about it.
Join WJCT for Guitar by Candlelight, featuring Benassé and Pablo. One night only, Thursday, January 15th at the WJCT Soundstage. Let Benassé and Pablo take you on an intimate musical journey to exotic places with classic songs. With fiery Spanish guitar, cool Mediterranean rhythms, join Benassé and Pablo for Guitar by Candlelight, an intimate concert experience. One night only, Thursday, January 15th at the WJCT Soundstage. Go to WJCT.org/events for tickets.
the next Fresh Air. Our end of the year series continues with Malala Yousafzai. She became the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner at age 17. In her memoir, she shares the vulnerable story of a young woman navigating friendship, first love, and self-discovery while living in the global spotlight. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
President Trump is requiring colleges to turn over data to prove they're not considering race in admissions.
He's not just opposed to racial preferences, he's opposed to the goal of racial diversity, which Americans support.
Richard Kallenberg is a progressive who believes admissions need to go beyond race. He says there's a better way to build real diversity on American campuses. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Parkinson's disease is the fastest growing brain disorder in the world. Nearly 90,000 Americans are diagnosed with the condition every year. That's 50% more annual cases than initially thought. We're revisiting an installment of our In Good Health series from earlier this year. We talked to two neurologists who say Parkinson's is entirely preventable. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, for those of you who get up early in the morning, we're among you. Not everybody wants to stay up till midnight on New Year's. There is an option, a midday option at the Jacksonville Zoo. Here to tell us about it is Curtis Dvorak. He is the wildlife wanderer with the Jacksonville Zoo and Botanical Gardens and an all-around great guy. Curtis, great to have you back.
Great to see you.
So this is called a Noon Year event.
Noon Year's Eve.
Who's it designed for?
It's designed for me.
Okay.
It's designed for me and my kids because I am no longer, I don't make it to midnight. And with a 7, 5, and 2-year-old.
Changed.
Yeah, times have changed quite a bit since our days when I first started at First Coast News. Yeah, so I don't make it to midnight. And so Noon Year's Eve is a chance to go out there and do all the traditional kind of things you do on New Year's, where you write some resolutions, you put them in some things, and we have a DJ playing music. There's apple juice toast, right at noon. We count down to noon, and then the DJ will fire off some cold sparks. That's what it says on the website there. Just some gerbs, kind of like, a little bit of pyrotechnics. Nothing dangerous, of course. And just a chance to celebrate and say Happy New Year, basically with Australia, I guess it is. We celebrate it. We celebrate.
Is that who we're in line with at noon?
Whatever noon is. Is it 12 hours ahead over there, I think? So, yeah. But it's your regular admission ticket gets you in. There's nothing extra you got to do. It's just a fun little added thing we do on December 31st.
Yeah. The zoo has really tried to kind of round out all sorts of family experiences. And this is, I guess, just one way of doing it. You mentioned your own kids. You said 7,
5, and 2.
And 2.
Yeah.
And another one in the oven.
Well, yeah. Breaking news, folks. Breaking news. There's
Sorry
another
if
one.
I'm letting that one out of the bag.
This is the first public announcement of it. We haven't done any social media of it or anything.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry if I'm getting out over our skis on that. But tell us, what is it that the zoo is for you and for them since you've taken on this role?
This role came about 2 years ago, and it was kind of, I went and pitched them on the role because they didn't have this role there. And I said, they need somebody, inside the gates there, pushing their stories and telling people about the zoo and being passionate about it. And I've loved this place for 30 years living in town. And now I'm right in the wheelhouse of, the predominant zoo, guest we have which is people with young kids. We call it the stroller brigade. and my kids love it. And I've loved it. And then seeing them go through the zoo and be inspired and wonder and just amazed, it kind of, like anything, like the holidays we just experienced, when you watch it through a child's eyes, you find a greater love for it. And so for me, it's just, again, another check off the box. You've known me for years. Every career, every job I've ever had, the only goal I have is to make 10-year-old me super stoked.
Yeah.
And every job I've ever had, whether it's be a life-size stuffed animal for the Jacksonville Jaguars, check. 10-year-old me was like, heck yeah. Be on TV, 10-year-old me was like, heck yeah. Be in commercials, cool. Work for the zoo, like it's, I don't want to work. I want to work for a living. I want to do fun stuff.
Some would say you don't need any help seeing through a child's eyes, Curtis.
No,
You sort of have those natural lenses on. There's also
never grow up. It's
never
a trap.
It is. Colors of the Wild is still something, though, for people who want an evening event at the zoo.
Yes.
So that's still happening.
Colors of the Wild. We are those. If you are the people who leave your Christmas lights up too long, come join us. We are those people. We will leave our Christmas lights up until February 8th. So you can come to Colors of the Wild weekends, Thursday through Sunday. You can check out jacksonvillezoo.org for the dates. Buy your tickets a day in advance. You save $5. Become a member. You save even more money. But yeah, it is an immersive lantern experience. And people think it's just colorful lights. It's very different than that. I mean, these are life-size, over life-size animals, plants, bugs, immersive sculptures. So there's a beautiful art aspect to it. And then at night when the lights turn on, grown adults walking around with their mouths like what? Like if you haven't been, I know you're listening right now going, okay, some colorful lights, big deal. Trust me, I promise you. If you go and you don't like it, call me and I'll get you free tickets for another visit.
Well, we were talking about how crowded it is in St. Augustine. There is not a traffic problem at the zoo when you're walking around and looking at the lights. And so it is an alternative of sorts for people who are looking for that kind of Christmas immersive holiday feel with all the lights.
100%. And it's not just, families like me with kids, and we love going to it, but it's a great date night. And it's a great just outing. And also it's a great adult outing because we serve alcohol.
Yeah.
So there's beer and wine.
Not just the sparkling apple juice at noon.
Yeah.
All right.
You can get beer at noon tomorrow. So come join us. Grab a beer and let's get wild.
Wednesday. It is tomorrow, the 31st.
Yeah.
New Year's. It starts at 10 and it is Zoo Year.
Noon Year's Eve.
Noon Year's Eve.
Noon Year's Eve.
Sorry about that. Noon Zoo Year's.
Yeah. Nooners. Yeah. It kind of. I won't go there.
All right. Curtis Dvorak, thank you so much for being here. Great to see you.
Always great seeing you.
All right. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have comments or questions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at wjct.org. Join us tomorrow when we discuss changes and challenges to the criminal justice system in Florida, from free speech in schools to due process for immigrants. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com.
Jacksonville's jazz radio. Cool, classic, and timeless. From legends like Miles to today's contemporary greats, Jacksonville's jazz radio, 89.9 HD4.